Okay, so I'm pretty sure we'll probably have some people popping in soon. But I want to thank you all for being here. I really, really appreciate it. I am going to be your moderator. I am Dr. Alexander Patrick. I am residential faculty in social sciences. I teach sociology. Some of you probably have me as your teacher this semester or have had me in other semesters. We also have our actual diversity coordinator here. Gina, you want to say anything? I think you're muted.
Just thank you. Thanks for all of you coming and supporting this event. This was a very interesting activity that I participated in and it was shared with me by Dr. Alexander Patrick. And so I know that I've encouraged students to come to this event, and I'm glad to see some of you here. And so I just want to say I'm excited to see how you all what you all think of the actual activity and how you all will feel afterwards. And
Awesome.
thanks for.
Thank you. So, what we want to do, we wanted to get the conversation started around diversity, equity, and inclusion among for our students. You know, we always talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we talk about it from the faculty and the employee side. But we want to know what you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what's your role in understanding how you play a part in the diversity, equity, and inclusion at the school, not just as a student experiencing it, but what do you do to contribute to that? So um, we also put this on with the Office of Student Life and Leadership. So you'll have some of the students from student organizations, some people from different classes. Feel free, if you haven't noticed, I am pretty informal when it comes to us speaking. So feel free to unmute yourself anytime you have a question. You can also type over in the chat. I'm trying to monitor that while we're also while we're talking here. So I'm taking a look at the chat, but don't feel shy because we're going to have an interactive session today. I'm actually going to put you all in groups and you're going to talk to each other. Hopefully you'll feel free enough to introduce yourself to the people in your group before you actually start talking about what we're gonna do here. But so without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and us into some groups, but I'm going to talk about this activity before we go into the groups. So what this activity is going to be, I'm going to put into the chat here in just a moment, a link that's going to take you to a page full of privileges. And within your group, you will have a certain amount of privileges that you have to choose in that group. And as a group, you're going to talk about which ones are the most important, why you all would choose whichever ones that you decide to choose. And then we're going to come back and talk about which ones you did choose and what was the process that you went through in specifically choosing the ones that your group thought were the most important that you could afford. Because essentially, you're going to be buying these privileges. If you had a certain amount of money, what would you use that money to buy? What would your world look like? Which one of these would you prefer to have in your world if you could have any other ones, right? So you might have in your groups as new people pop in and out, you might have a couple more people that are added to your group, depending on if people are coming in late or not. But I just wanted you to know that I'm also going to pop into each one of the groups and and I'm going to give you a certain amount of money that you're going to have in that group. And then I'm going to give you about between 5 and 10 minutes to maybe not even that long, maybe 7 minutes. We'll just say 7 minutes on average so that you all can discuss which ones your group would choose. So, do we have any questions before we get started with that? After these groups, we're going to talk about everything there and then any questions that you all might have. And we're just going to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion at GCC in general as it as it pertains to you all. Kimberly, I saw you unmuted. Did you have a question?
I don't have a question. I was just getting ready to interact.
Gotcha. Okay. No problem. So first, I'm going to pop a link into the chat. I would like each one of you to click that link. And if you cannot access it, just let me know. That way that I can make sure that the settings are active for everyone. And I take it since I'm hearing silence, everybody can access the document. Is that correct?
It's a list of questions, correct, Patrick?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna pop you in your groups. Let's see here. We got enough for 3 people at least. Okay, so I'm going to, did anybody else new pop in here? Okay, I don't think so. Okay, if you're gonna pop into your groups and then I'm going to pop into the girls groups shortly thereafter. I don't think anybody new was added, but if you did, just let me know. Okay, here we go.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so I'm jumping in here just to let you all know that you have $300, and each one of the privileges are worth $100. Any questions? Okay,
Denise, or
I'm
I
sorry.
joined late, so I didn't even hear any of the instructions. I apologize.
Is that Jennifer?
Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
that's me.
okay, just to give you a quick update, you have I'm gonna put, I don't know if you can still see this, but I put in your chat, I think I put in your chat in your breakout session the document with the privileges, and you as your group is going to choose 3 essentially because you have $300 that are the most important.
I can help us.
Okay, okay, I'm gonna pop out.
Okay. Okay, so basically,
Man, I
There.
could be asleep right now.
Okay.
Hello.
Sorry, I'm popping in and out of groups. So you all have $400. Each one of the privileges are worth $100 each. So you get to choose your top 4. Any
Top 4 for
questions for me?
what? Top 4 for what?
Your top 4 privileges. Did you get that link?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. So you choose your top 4. Each privilege is worth $100 and your group has $400. So that means you get to choose the top 4 privileges that you all would think are the most important.
Okay.
Okay? All right.
Right.
I'm gonna leave your session.
Okay.
So,
I think
Sorry, I was popping in and out of the groups.
oh, that's okay. That's all right. We were just discussing. So Elizabeth can't see any of the privilege list. So
Okay.
I just was reading it off to her.
Okay. I put it in your chat again. Do you have that, Elizabeth?
No, I can't get the chat to open up, but I can try logging out and logging back in.
It's gonna take you out of your session, but
Okay.
you if you can read them to her, Kimberly, that's still great.
Yeah.
If you do happen to log out, I can put you back in the group, but it might take a little brief moment. But you all have $100, and each one of the privileges are worth $100. So that means you got to choose the most important one.
So we pick out
So we
one
have to
total.
so basically we have to pick out of the 1 out of 40 privileges, and with the $100 figure out what we want to do with it.
Yes, you pick the top
Okay.
one that you would purchase. If you couldn't live with one of these, which one would it be?
Oh, okay.
That makes sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so let me get
I'm gonna give you all 200. You all have 2.
200.
Okay.
All
Yes.
right.
So you can pick the top
$200.
2. Okay, I'm gonna leave your group.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Okay. Millie, are you able to get into a group, or were you in a group? Okay, so I think most people are back in the room. All right, so how did it go? What did you choose? Which groups want to speak first? Don't be shy. How was your process? What did the privilege list look like? Go for it, Denise. I saw you on mute.
Oh, okay. So for mine, well, the one that we mainly agree on was number 5, which is having full abilities both visible and visible and invisible. The majority of us agreed on that one because that one's like it's a privilege to have that. But we didn't agree on the other two because we all have different like thoughts on it. So yeah.
Okay, and so your group had 300, so you had to choose three. What other persons in that group want to speak on the ones that you all couldn't agree on, and why? What made you disagree on them?
I
I
don't
can speak on
think,
that. Go ahead.
no, I was gonna say, I don't think we necessarily disagree. It's just we all are very different and we all have different backgrounds and different ways that we grew up to where, for one person, the health insurance one, making sure that you had health insurance, growing up in a family that has health insurance, where I understand I have friends who don't have health insurance, but like growing up I did. So it's not something that I know it's a privilege, but it's not something that for me would be at the top of the list because it's always been there, if that makes sense.
Okay, what was the one that was at the top of the list for you, outside of having full abilities?
I chose number 10 and number 20. So being able to attend college without needing to work full time to support the family, and not having to take out student loans. So I know I eventually will need student loans. Right now I don't, but I know I'm going to. So it'd be nice to not have to.
Okay, and I heard someone else who was speaking just a moment ago. Was that Abel?
Yeah, that was me.
Go
Yeah.
for it.
So for me, I picked, I believe it was 17 and 30, basically not being bullied because of your race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and also not being pulled over because you look suspicious.
Okay.
So for me, although it was weird, although I've never really experienced that and I have my own disadvantages, I still chose that for other people just because I feel like nobody should ever have to go through experiences like that just because of how they look.
Okay.
So I picked two as number 5 that I agreed with all of them.
Okay. Okay. And another group?
I have to agree with Jennifer because Elizabeth and I were in one group, and it took us a little bit longer because I had to read all of the lists. But basically, for me, it's a struggle. Like, obviously, I'm older than I was 20 years ago, so I have different privileges and stuff. And so for me, it's I want to make sure I don't go into debt while going to school, but still being able to accomplish everything that I need. So we were given $200. I would try to do as much as I could to where I didn't have to, you like go into debt if I did, that kind of
Okay.
thing.
And Elizabeth, how did you feel?
So we only had, like so much time to talk about it. I definitely think not going into debt is really important. It's definitely something that I'm working really hard to make sure that I'm not going into debt as it is right now. But the ones that really stood out to me were the ones that had to do with sexual orientation, and more importantly, the ones that basically give you like the straight privileges. Like you're not, if you have kids and you're in a gay relationship, you're not worried that your kids are going to get bullied, or that you can just openly celebrate with your family and have your family be happy for you
Hmm.
opposed to judging you. So like those I couldn't really pick because there were so many that stood out to me, but specifically it was those kinds of privileges that I was just like, wow, okay, I didn't realize that.
Okay. And that's the point of thinking about privilege. Most of us don't even realize we have privileges or realize that other people don't have the benefits or the rights that we typically take for granted, right? That's the whole idea behind privilege. And this list is not, even though we're thinking about things that we may not think about daily, it's not to make anybody feel bad for having those privileges at all. Your life, it's great if you do have these privileges, but it's just to sort of get us to start thinking about things that other people might experience that we don't experience in our daily lives, right? I think I have at least one more group that I didn't hear from yet. Malachi, how about your group? Did I? Okay, there you go.
We chose number 4, 6, 19, and 32.
Okay.
And for me personally, I was most of the time I was thinking about the number 6.
Having
And
parents that encourage you to go to college?
yeah, because me personally, my whole family encouraged me to start college because they didn't want me to have to struggle in life. And they said that me struggling through getting a job and having to struggle from there would set me back sometimes. So they encouraged me to go to college. I know my homeboys, they don't have families that encourage them. Their parents didn't care if they started college or went to work, as long as
Okay.
that they were doing something.
Okay. Now, courage is, or encouragement is not one of those things that we typically think about, regularly as a privilege. How does encouragement, or even encouragement from one another, just your fellow classmates, does that impact whether or not you're going to do well at school or how you feel about being at school?
I absolutely think it does. If you're working really hard and you're going to school, obviously, like in person, and you're working really hard, but you come home and the people you live with, they don't take it seriously, they don't give you the time to study, that's going to impact you. Obviously, some of it is just up to you and your study habits, but having a good support system while you're in school is really important. My family's very supportive, so I've never had to go without that. So that's a privilege I have and I'm really grateful for.
Thank you. I don't know what to add to that, but if you think about just your classmates and listening to just what Malachi and Elizabeth just said, having family support is one thing. Having friends support you or fellow classmates support you is another thing. If you're coming from a background where it's not encouraged for you, depending on what your identities are, it's not encouraged for you to even entertain education or education's not seen as something that's cool or whatever it may be, just to have your friends supporting you can change your outlook and whether or not you even put an effort into the classes that you're taking, right? um, I'm not exactly sure who else was in your group, Malachi, but I would love to hear from anybody else who hadn't had an opportunity to speak. Anybody? I think
Yeah, I
go
was
for it.
with his group too. Okay, but like I thought about number 11, growing up with the message that you are intelligent, because I feel since you're like clear and have that idea, you can grow up to be someone successful and have more ideas about how to be successful and about life in general.
Mhm.
So it's important to have that idea and have people support you in general. Yeah, as a family.
Right. Sometimes we don't think about the messages and what we learn about other people is sometimes straight from the media that we see, whether it's social media or the movies, whatever it may be. If you've never met someone who's different from you, but you've seen them in television shows or you've seen images or portrayals of different groups of people, when you interact with those people, sometimes the messages that you've already received about those people are built into your interactions and you don't even know it, right? We think about something like an implicit bias, and those are things that you don't think about. And it's not saying that you truly believe these things. However, your socialization has already been impacted by the messages that you've received from these different groups. So I mean, and for those of you that saw that list, it's It seems like it's a long list, but it's a very, very short list. And there's so many other privileges that could be included in that list that are not on that list. There's a lot that's not on that list, right? But that list is sort of just a an introduction to start to think about where you come from and what other people might be experiencing um, in their backgrounds every day that might be different from you. One of the questions I have for you all at this point is, what does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you? How do you differentiate between those? You can feel free to unmute yourself. You can feel free to type it in the chat, either one. But what is the difference between those for you? How would you define diversity? How would you define equity or inclusion? Have you thought about those? Don't worry, I'll take a moment. I don't mind the uncomfortable silence.
I mean, obviously, I know what those words mean, like definition wise, but I've never necessarily thought about what it meant to me. Even though we are in my, like, just right here, my husband and my kids, we're I don't know if I'd say cultural, but we're diverse because I'm white, my husband's black, my son is half Puerto Rican, so my daughter's biracial. So like we're a mixed bunch.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's weird that I guess I've never thought about what it would mean to me, because so diversity, I would say, is just everybody being different and um recognizing the differences, but also recognizing what makes us similar.
Okay.
Um, Equity, for some reason, my head just keeps wanting to think money.
Okay.
Um, but I'm not quite sure how to place that into like this context, if that
Mm-hmm.
makes sense. So I don't know if it's like access to, the same, maybe not equity in like the like actual dollars, but maybe equity in like terms of being able to obtain those funds, for lack of a better word. Maybe it's like job opportunities.
Okay.
I can't word it the way I'm thinking.
Okay. No, that's
um,
fine. That's what this conversation's for.
and
Anybody
then
want to
in
help her
terms,
out with how you might see it? And
I can go ahead.
go for it.
So for me, kind of like the way I define it is the three words building on top of one another. So I see diversity as, again, bringing people from all sorts of backgrounds, abilities, sexual orientation, just a bunch of different people. And then, including them all in, whatever activity, conference, anything that's going on. And as for equity, I see it as, treating them all with equality, treating them as human beings without any judgment whatsoever.
Okay. What would be the difference between equity and equality?
Equity and equality.
Yes, because I
Um,
heard you mention both of them in the same sentence.
I guess I tried to say equity is equality.
Ah, okay. Anybody feel differently?
I do a little bit. When I think of equality, I think of everyone being equal, which I think you can achieve through both. But if we're just thinking of equality, there's that graphic that I've seen through my other classes where it's like there's three people standing at a fence, and one person is in a wheelchair, one person's standing on a box, and one person is just standing.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're all equal because they can all see over the fence. However, like equity is that each person is given more what they need.
Okay, okay. So what I'm hearing from Elizabeth is that when it comes to equality, we're not paying attention to the differences. But when it comes to equity, we have to pay attention to the differences. Is that what I heard, Elizabeth?
Yes, that is like that. Those are what's I'm trying. That's what's going on in my head, but it's not what came out of my mouth.
No, don't worry. That's what I'm here for. Abel, did you hear that the differences there?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. So Kimberly, did you have something to say? I see yours when unmuted. I don't want to overlook you.
Oh, I was just listening. Well, no, I totally agree with all the points that everyone has had. So for me, like I look at it as, and you guys are talking about like equality and diversity and everything, but like look at the world today, like all of the things that we've dealt with in the past year or so, and we had been dealing with it even previous to the year that we've dealt with, where I'll give you a little bit of a short story. So my parents are both Latinos. One's from South America, the other one's from Mexico. I was born here on the 4th of July. So I'm very diverse. I have a lot of, just like her screen just went away, but Jennifer was talking earlier and saying that her family's so diverse. So is mine. And this, for me, like when I think of that word, I look at it as the United States, how so many people, so many countries that we consist as the US, as different diversities of different places all around the world. And yet we have our difficulties of like getting along and things like that. Like, oh, you have this, or but that's not fair because you have that. And like, we should look at it as an overall thing where we're all here for one main goal, and that is to better ourselves or to strive or get higher in our education and our whatever goals we have are pretty much the same, just different ways of getting there and different struggles and things. And some of our struggles might even be the same. But we don't know that because I feel like sometimes we may hinder our beliefs and our ways of thinking and not realizing that each one of us have that same goal kind of thing. So
Okay.
no,
So
that's my thought process of it.
no, I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying. So when we think about diversity, and you all have done a good job of identifying that we're talking about differences among people and not just those classic commonly named forms of diversity like race or ethnicity, gender, sexuality, religion, nationality. We have to think beyond that. We also have to think about the person who has children that is going to school. And I've heard some of you talk about, you have families and you're going to school, or you might have to take out student loans. These are different experiences that we're all going to have. Some of us come from backgrounds where we've had a difficult time, regardless of the way that we look or regardless of any other status that we've had. We might have to work full time and attend school. We might have to take care of a family member. Those are also forms of diversity that we have to consider. So what Abel said earlier, we're talking about just a bunch of different types of people, regardless of just a phenotypical, what they look like on the outside. Um, but we also have this idea of equity versus inclusion, and I'm sorry, equity versus equality. And we specifically talk about equality, treating everybody the same. When we treat everyone the same, it does not necessarily mean that everybody will still be able to achieve the same things, right? I think it was Elizabeth who talked about the different groups of people that were standing in front of a fence or right in front of a fence, right? If we treated everyone the same, I like to think about bicycles all the time, but I definitely know that graphic where the people are at the fence. But if I think about people who are a different height and we give them a bicycle, we give them the same bicycle, and that bicycle is very tall, right? For a person who is 5'1", I'm 6'2", almost 6'3", for those of you that have not met me in person. If you give someone who's 5'1" a bicycle that fits a person my size, they're not going to be able to ride that bicycle because their legs can't reach the pedal, right? Or maybe they'll have to stand and ride it, but they can't sit and ride as comfortably as I can down the street. So our experiences are going to be very, very different from one another. But if we are treating people, if we're thinking about equality, then we give them all the same bicycle. But when it comes to equity, we start to think about what are the different person's needs, right? If we want everyone to be able to ride down the street together on a bicycle comfortably, then we have to give them one that fits each one of their specific heights, right? So the person who's 5'1", you give them a bicycle that would probably make me very, very uncomfortable trying to ride that bicycle. But if you give me one that fits myself and you give them one that fits them, then as we ride, we can both ride, we can ride comfortably, and we would have a wonderful time. So if the goal was for us to be able to ride comfortably down the street together, then we've done that by paying attention to the different heights of those persons. right? When we think about that inclusion aspect, then we're talking about making sure that anybody who wants to participate in this bike ride, they're able to participate, and they're able to participate as their authentic self. So if you're one of those people who wants a bike that has streamers on it and, I don't know, glitter in the paint, if we say, okay, bring your very shiny, brilliant bicycle to this bike ride, you are free to ride that bike however you want it, with no hands, no feet, whatever it may be that would get you down that street. We welcome that part or that aspect of you, and we celebrate that, but not letting that be a hindrance because we say we want everyone with a black bike to come ride down the street, right? We don't want to exclude anyone. We want everybody to feel welcome to be at the table. What do you do as a student to make sure that other students feel welcome when they are in your presence? Do you do anything? Why not? Why do you do whatever it is that you do? Do you ever think about the other people that are around you or that are in your group if you're doing group work with a class? How do you make different people feel welcome? Do you make an attempt to do those kinds of things?
I feel like for me, when I was younger, I was more of the timid type. Like I still was outgoing, but I was very timid because I was always in my head of like what do other people think of me and stuff like that. Now that I'm older, I feel like I'm one that I have already kind of experienced things, and so for me, it's like, okay, so I'll give you an example. I'm in one of Professor Desai's classrooms, and so I see that some of my colleagues in my class are, you know, struggling somehow, some way. And so if I hear that someone's struggling, I reach out. Like I'm like, hey, I may not know the right answer, but let's try to figure this out together. Or I've thrown out ideas to where they can either, you know, accept them or not accept them, but at least I reach out to them to see if they need help. But that's just me now.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? And I don't want anybody to feel like can't answer. Just jump in.
Uh, um, for me personally, when I was in high school, I was more outgoing. I was more social and all that. Um, I'm good at math. So when there was other students having trouble in it, I would help them out, like new student, hi, how are you? If you ever need any help, I'm the person that'll help you, either me or the teacher. Um, I would help people and all that, and just get along with them.
What has stopped you from doing that in college?
Uh, just how I would be treated. That's about it.
So people respond differently in a college setting.
Yeah.
Okay. How okay, let me ask this question. How are they responding differently? And or even has your response been different to the way that people respond to you in college besides, you know, closing down?
My response to their response, I would say, has been different. That I would say I may have a little bit of anger issues, all that. So something said the wrong way and I take it a whole different way, I go off on people.
Okay. Thank you for being honest, because that's one of the most important things that we'll have to do as we're thinking about, are we fair to one another? Are we doing things to make sure that people are included? One of the things that we do as you're in college, one of the things that you should learn is how to have civil discourse with one another. And that means that sometimes you're going to hear things you don't like, you may not agree with. Sometimes people are going to, and I'm bringing that up just because we're in a time where um, many times we don't, when people have an opinion that's different from ours, we tend to block them. We tend to, if we feel offended immediately, we tend to shut down a little bit. But part of education is to be able to hear things that are not necessarily things you might like or things you agree with. If we're going to make informed, critical decisions, sometimes we have to consider what might someone who does not agree with me think about whatever this decision is that we have to make, right? Because then it'll allow you to be able to evaluate all sides of whatever that scenario is, that experience that you're going through is, right? Or even thinking about why might I feel a certain way based on some response that I got from someone, right? What is it about that response that made me feel offended? Because the person who made the response, they may not actually know that they offended you, right? But if you can find ways to have that discussion with that person, it might help, you find a common ground, or they might learn that whatever it was that they said or did could be seen as offensive. So you might actually help that person in that moment. Right. So thank you for sharing that. I also saw that we had one of our instructors who put in the comments, which I appreciate, is that you make an effort to get to know the people from different backgrounds in your classrooms and make an effort to include them. And that's one of the things that we have to do even as students. If you don't know something about a particular group of people or a person who's different from you, um, ask the person. Or we live in a time where it's easy for us to go and find information about other people. But I would say one of the best things is to have a conversation. And when you're genuinely interested in what other people experience or what their backgrounds are, I think they would be more willing to talk to you. One of the easiest ways to keep a conversation going is to ask people about themselves, because in those moments, people like talking about themselves. So ask them about themselves and what what makes them tick, or if there's something you don't understand. Ask them those questions. What is this, or where does it come from? Right? When you're genuinely interested, people can pick up on that, and they're willing to have those kinds of conversations. Um, I will say one of the journeys that our school is on is trying to figure out how do we become more equitable towards one another, and how do we create a culture where everyone cares about one another, right? There's this idea that I feel like our school should be on this journey to becoming people ready. And what does it mean to be people ready, even as a student? What does it mean if you hear someone say to you, are you people ready? If they ask you that question, what does that mean to you? What does it mean to ask, are you people ready?
I feel like, for me personally, I feel like when people ask you, "Are you people ready?" are kind of like, when you meet someone, are you gonna interact with them? Are you gonna like continue the conversation? Are you gonna try to get to know them? I feel like that's what it is, like being outgoing. That's for me personally.
Okay. Anyone else?
Think people ready is also going in with the mindset that you're going to disagree with people. You're going to have like hard moments, like, just kind of setting yourself up to understand, like, I'm leaving my bubble of my brain. Like, I guess, I mean, that's kind of a funny way to say it, but when you're interacting with other people, they're going to have different opinions, and you have to know how to handle that.
Mm-hmm. Abel, were you speaking to as well?
Yeah, I was just going to say that I agree with both Denise and Elizabeth. That I think it's pretty much a measure of your social skills. Are you willing to have social interactions with other people, and how well can you do that?
Okay.
And see their perspectives.
Okay. Here's a question for you all. Do you expect everyone to be ready for you?
Oh God, no, I'm a lot.
Sorry.
No.
No, I think everybody has their comfort zone where they feel that they want to interact or not interact. I think it's like you've said, if you ask a question, people like to talk about themselves and tell them other people about where they came from and where they're from. But at the same time, I think you also kind of listen to see if that's something that you're interested in wanting to interact. So it's like whether you feel comfortable or not, it's also if you're interested in that type of conversation or the same values or things like that, that you want to like interact with another person.
Okay, right. I agree with everything that you all have been saying. When we think about what equity is, it's to ask ourselves that question: Are we people ready? What we mean by that, like you all said, people are going to have differences of opinion. They're going to come from different backgrounds, but are you open to to experiencing each one of these people from these different backgrounds in the ways that they see the world, or do you expect them to bend to the way that you see the world and interact with everyone the way that you think that they should interact with them, even if that's just the language that you use, right? You expect people to speak a certain way, but we come from different places, and that means that we speak differently. Some of us have more excitement in our voices. I like to call it excitement because sometimes we can think about it as offensive, because people are, you might think that they're yelling or they're screaming, but maybe where they're from, people speak loudly. I'm from the South. I've lived in Arizona for almost 5 years now, and where I'm from, people speak very, very differently. They use different speech patterns. They use English differently. In Louisiana, the official language is English, but our secondary languages there are French and Creole. So sometimes that blends into our English, and the words that we use are different. Are you off put immediately because someone uses English in a way that you don't use it? Or, maybe English is their second language and they speak it with a different type of accent. Are you immediately off put, or does your interaction change with them because of that? Right. And if so, is it a negative outcome or is it a positive outcome? Right. Are you open to meeting them where they are and then maybe helping them reach the goals that they have set for themselves, as opposed to the goals that you think that they should have? Right. So when we think about equity, we have to think about, are we being fair to everyone in every situation? Do we expect everyone to live up to our standards? Or can we do something to help that person reach their own goals of success, whatever that may be, in those interactions? Right. So you all as students, when you look at your professors, your instructors, our staff, is there a particular type of staff that you would prefer to interact with? And why do you think that? And don't worry, this is a rhetorical portion. You don't actually have to answer that question, but what I want you to think is, are you off put by certain staff members because of how they look or how they speak? Right? This question comes in, and this applies to, and because I said people ready, I'm not just limiting your interactions to students. I'm opening those interactions up to the people who are teaching your classes, the people who you interact with as advisors, the people who you interact with as your college administrators. The one thing that we all have in common is that we're people. Before we're anything else, we're still people. So you might see us at your local grocery store. You might see us, I don't know, in the same church, depending on if we're religious people, right? When you see different groups of people and they're different from you, what are your ideas behind your thoughts about those people and your interactions with them? Are you a blank slate in that moment? No, we're not. We're all socialized from our different backgrounds, regardless of where we come from. I don't it whether you're from the US or whether you're from somewhere else, right? We all have a background, but are we open-minded enough to sort of let go of our preconceived notions about people and how we interact with them, so that we can create a positive interaction, and also let them know that people who are just like you, whatever that may be, are also open people, because your interaction with them will color their interactions with someone else who's like you, whatever that category that they might put you in, right? Um, any thoughts so far? Any questions? Any confusion that we have not covered? We have about 19 minutes or so that I have left planned. That's on the time block. We don't have to use all of that, but I want this time to be for questions from you all, and anything that you learned or anything that you still feel confused about. I have another question for you all. How do you take the information that you learned here and have conversations with your fellow classmates and fellow other students and people in your family and people in the community, because we don't stop just at the walls of GCC, right? We interact beyond that.
I feel like for me, I'm every day, I'm learning even at my age. I still kind of, have my like, high school stuff where it's like, oh, I don't want to say anything because, but then I think about it, I'm like, well, what if there's 10 other people in this classroom or even in my own family or people I meet on the street that need help or whatever? Like maybe they're thinking those things too. And instead of me thinking that I can't help, maybe just try to help. The worst I've ever learned is if you don't reach out to someone, the worst they could say is, no, I don't need help, or thank you for helping. You know what I mean? Like you're not stopping yourself from growing or doing any of that if you just reach out and try to help someone in the first place. Because we all have those moments where we do need that extra person to be like, gosh, thank you, because I was thinking the same thing, or or whatnot. So I try to like still learn as I go and try to help people as I go as well.
Thank you. Yes. I always tell people if you don't ask the question, the answer is always no. So let
Agreed.
someone else tell you no. Don't tell yourself no. Anyone else?
I can go. Um, I think for me, based off of what I learned here today, I would definitely want to continue to have like more conversations about, culture and diversity with the people I meet. For me personally, that's something I like to do, especially if they're from like the same place I'm from, which is Nairobi, Kenya. I get very excited. So I want to continue to have those conversations and just, make other people aware of diversity and equity, and also inclusion too.
Awesome. And where was that? I didn't catch that name.
Nairobi, Kenya.
Ah, okay. Okay. Awesome.
But yeah, besides that, all I have to say is it was really great having these conversations with other students. Unfortunately, though, I do have to go.
No problem. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it.
Take care, everybody.
Okay. Anyone else? Oh, that's awesome. I did not know that. See, you learn something new every day. I'm reading some of the comments here. One of the things that I do want to say to you all is that if you're going to engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion as a student, one of the things you have to have is courage, just in general. Many of us are afraid to speak up when we see something that might be unfair or we see someone being treated poorly. Um, Sometimes that mistreatment is not intentional. It might come from just the other person not understanding the impact of their words, the impact of their actions on other people. But it might just take having just a brief conversation, just stepping to the side saying, hey, this could be seen as offensive. You may not be aware. And if you're genuinely open to people, again, they may say, they may apologize and say straight to you or to that person, that is not what I intended to have happen, and I apologize for that. It might be in that moment that they learn something new, but if you never speak up to them, they may never know that they did something that was offensive or that could harm or hurt someone else's feelings. So I encourage all of you to have courage and um, forgiveness. Understand that we're vulnerable because we are all in a process of learning. If you're going to have a conversation with someone about something that might be offensive, you have to find a way to sort of forgive that person, not just for themselves, but for you. Because if we are living in a space of anger, it's hard for us to think through things. It's hard for us to continue to do our work. It's hard for us to focus on what we need to do. But if you can find a space to help educate others as well as forgive them, it will help you in your own life, right? So If you're going to have those conversations, understand that we're all vulnerable because we are in a learning process, and learning doesn't stop just because you've gotten your college degree or your high school degree, right? Once you get those degrees, okay, you're educated in some subject matter, but it does not mean you're educated in all the people that you'll meet throughout your life, the people that you'll work with. As you come in contact with new people, even if you have children, for those of you that have children, you know that they have their own personalities. And sometimes those personalities may not be exactly what you want them to be, but you have to find a way to coexist with them, right? You have to understand where they're coming from, try to understand where they're coming from, and they have to try to understand where you're coming from and what is influencing our personality development or the way that we see our perspectives on how we see the world, right? Anyone else want to speak or, have something burning that we did not cover today or something that was still confusing? Nobody? Everybody feels like everything we said was very, very clear?
I'd like to say something.
Go for it.
If you enjoyed this experience and found it to be helpful, and if it helped you to understand certain privileges that you weren't even aware of were a privilege, I would just encourage you to come to or tell your friends about this experience, and get more people to come as well, because we will do this again. And so we just want to expose more and more students to these types of conversations, because they're so powerful in the sense of us recognizing who we are and exactly what is important to us as individuals. And so I would just encourage all of you to go ahead and share with others that these opportunities are here at GCC.
Yes, I will second that. Thank you, Gina. Jennifer, I saw you unmuted. I didn't know if we interrupted you or not.
It's okay. I was just gonna say, when you said about pointing out to someone that their actions or their words is offensive to somebody else, I wish more people would reply as you just did, with grace and like no, like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, and now I know, and like learn from it, versus the people that I tend to come across on social media. You tell them, hey, that's really offensive, not necessarily to me as a white person, but definitely to someone else in a different, color or different religion, or different culture in general. And, people will, a lot of the times I find, double down on what they say and just be worse individuals than they were before. So I mean, obviously we've learned with social media, some people you just have to block and ignore, but I definitely wish more people would learn from what other people try to tell them. When you say, hey, that's not okay, learn from it, versus getting defensive and then fighting back and it just being worse than
Right,
than it should have been.
right. Well, that's where you all come in. That's where we come in, as people. It's we have to find ways of letting people know that it's okay to disagree with one another. The question should be, why do you feel that way, as opposed to thinking about how can we defend what it was that we said and or did. Think about trying to understand the other person's perspective. It's I like to think in this term that sometimes it's better to understand than to try to be understood. When we try to be understood, many times we might be defensive really, really quickly. But if we try to understand what the other person's saying, it's possible that they're saying what we're saying. We might be saying the same thing, but in a different way, right? So if we listen and listen for understanding as opposed to listening to respond to one another, those are different. But yes, I agree, Jennifer and Stone.
I agree with you too, Patrick and Jennifer. Like, I also think too, and I don't know, maybe this is just me getting older and understanding things differently, but like for me, I think sometimes people they get embarrassed when they're addressed. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
example, like I may say something and then it might be inappropriate or something, and not realizing it wasn't to be inappropriate. It was just the way that I thought of something or whatnot, if someone addressed me in front of, like, let's say a group or people, most people get very embarrassed because they're like, wow, you caught me in front of all these people I don't know, or even people I do know, and you embarrassed me. And so I feel like most of us, the common, put up this front where it's like, oh, you're attacking me, so I have to get my guard up. And so then, like Jennifer said, people get worse. They get aggressive, they say insulting or mean things, and they don't mean to say those things, but that's their reaction to being, confronted or told, hey, you did something wrong, because nobody likes to be told that they're wrong.
Right.
So I think that's a lot of our miscommunication in general. And I think the more that we educate each other, and like Professor Desai said, if we, tell people more about these groups and, share things, we can, maybe educate more people that are in that group of people that feel, oh gosh, I didn't know I was doing that, or I am that type of person. And maybe how can I better myself to not be in that category, kind of thing. So
Exactly. Thank you. Yes. So, like Professor Desai said, share this kind of information with everyone. If you see, because we will continue to have these conversations because we want more and more students to participate. We want more and more students to start to think about how diversity, equity, inclusion impacts their lives, what their roles are in this journey with us, and in their own lives. How do they build on those things in any environment that they find themselves in, whether it's a work environment or, I don't know, somebody in their family has a relationship with someone that might be outside of what they're typically used to. How do they engage in that and build on that relationship as opposed to tearing down those relationships? So, um, I want to thank you all for joining us. I know we had a smaller group today, but hopefully we'll have larger groups in the future. Um, Primarily, we advertised for our student groups and those people within our classes. So I really appreciate you all joining us. We will advertise for larger groups in the future, but I hope you all enjoyed this activity, and we'll try to do more of these more frequently in the future. So please share the information. I think I did record this so we could have this on our diversity website, so that if you want to go back and listen to the conversation again, you are free to go do that. And you can share it with your classmates, share it with your fellow students. So I really want to say thank you all for joining us. And if you don't have any other questions, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. But if you do have more questions, feel free to stay with us. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks.